Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. Today we'll be talking about how to measure digital experience objectively. Along the way, we'll also be sharing how to apply some of these insights to your own customer experience strategies. First of all, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Ben Harris and I'm the founder and CEO at Decibel, which is a marketing technology set up to rid the world of digital frustration and improve digital customer experience. Prior to that, for 20 years, I've worked with some of the world's largest brands, helping them improve user experience and customer experience. I'm happy to be partnering today with CX leader Don Peppers. Don is recognized as one of the world's leading authorities on customer-focused strategies. With business partner Dr. Martha Rogers, he's written 9 international bestsellers that collectively sold over 1 million copies, including the One-to-One Future, which Business Week called the Bible of New Marketing. Separately, he also penned Customer Experience, What, How, and Why Now, which I highly recommend. Today, he's one of the most widely read LinkedIn influencers on the topic of customer experience, with over 300,000 followers. Don is as close as you can get to a pop star in the B2B world, and one of the reasons I was so keen to work with him is his obvious continued passion for the subject.
Well, thanks, Ben. Looking forward to this.
So we're keen to receive questions. Pop them in the questions panel as they occur to you throughout the presentation, and we'll answer them at the end. And if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please let us know and we'll do our very best to help. To give some context of the webinar, just briefly describe some of the problems that we're seeking to solve. We all know that when something goes wrong on a website or app, you feel helpless and frustrated and tend to give up or go elsewhere and make that purchase. And while this is a reality of our daily lives, it's actually completely unnecessary and it's really expensive for brands. Brands generally have to pay to acquire you to get you to their website or app. And if you then don't buy something, it leaves them with this really heavy cost to bear. Made worse, of course, when multiplied across all customers that left because of a similar poor experience. So getting customer experience right can have a really huge positive and tangible impact on a business. And one of the amazing things about being in digital is that we can have a meaningful influence on this. I think that future generations will look back at this era and laugh at the primitive problems that we faced when we tried to interact with brands online. Decibel is leading the charge to change this and is actually having a profound effect by helping eradicate the issues that previously caused millions of people difficulty every day. To me, customer experience is not just about the creation of an efficient and smooth and inspirational journey. It's also about being able to understand when inevitably those experiences go wrong so you can respond to them. Decibel's intelligence platform for digital experience provides companies with the tools and data they need to eliminate these problems that causes customer frustration. It exposes those difficult interactions as they occur so companies can A, communicate with customers empathetically when they're experiencing those issues to try and keep them in the buying cycle, and B, to fix those problems for others so they don't have to experience them. And of course, doing this builds trust and it reduces abandonment and increases the number of customers that spend and also the amount they spend as well. So what can be done to help businesses with these challenges? Well, in this webinar, we'll discuss how objective metrics can improve a customer's understanding of the digital experience it provides. This method of measuring digital experience is designed to empower you to influence your customer experience strategy and champion it internally, ultimately to drive change. We'll look at the different types of experiential data that indicate particular intentions and emotions in customers and how to use this information to improve customer experience. And we'll look at the newly available technologies that can pull this data together so you can understand why customers behave in the way they do. Because providing this type of visibility into digital experience can empower an organization at every level to easily identify experience issues and make improvements. Over to Don.
Well, thank you, Ben. Yeah, thank you. And, when I talk to audiences around the world and clients and so forth, I tell them there are basically 3 types of obstacles that you have to overcome to deliver a better customer experience. One has to do with alignment, and alignment It's a silos problem. You have different silos of organization. You have alignment problems if you pay salespeople commissions for selling products, but your objective is to keep customers longer. The easiest customers to get are typically the least loyal customers to begin with, so that causes an alignment problem. The second class of problems is the mindset at the company. You can't write a simple line of code that results in employees delighting customers. The employees have to want to delight the customer. Your workers have to want to deliver a better customer experience. That's the mindset. But the third obstacle is a set of capabilities, and that's what we're going to talk about now, the capabilities obstacle. And so capabilities have to do with the tools as well as the processes and business rules that surround the delivery of a better customer experience. And capabilities are important. Decibel offers a very, very interesting capability when it comes to assessing the digital customer experience. Assessing that quality is critical to delivering a better and better customer experience and tracking your progress and so forth. So the next slide is, if you think about the quality of the customer experience, what you want is a frictionless experience. What I say, unless your name is Disney, customers don't come to you for the experience. They come to you to solve a problem or to meet some need, and if they could do that without ever having to darken your door, that would be the best customer experience for most customers, where the need or the problem just goes away with no effort on their part. The qualities in a frictionless experience are that it's reliable, the product works, the service works as advertised, it's valuable, it's good value for money, it's relevant to the customer doesn't have to tell you over and over again about different kinds of things, and it's trustable, where you're actually acting in the interest of the client. So the client trusts you to respect his interest, even if it might not be as profitable for you. I don't want to have to constantly be looking over my shoulder and trying to decide whether you're just trying to sell me something or whether you really think this is good for me. And on the next slide, there are basically two kinds of data that should always be used when you're evaluating customer experience quality. One is a direct feedback from customers, okay, and that's voice of customer data, NPS scores, customer satisfaction scores. Basically, these are mostly surveys done. Sometimes they're transactional, but they come direct from customers. And there's also the actual product and service performance data, and that's something that you can see. You can see it in front of you. Every customer's experience is subjective. It's definitive, it's personal, but fundamentally, customers have their own feeling. Every customer's experience is his or her own personal experience, but the problem with that is that the subjectivity of that experience, while it's a big asset in terms of getting the feedback from the customer, it can create issues. So there's a theory in behavioral economics called prospect theory, which illustrates the subjectivity in opinions. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky put together prospect theory to explain basically the often seemingly irrational behavior of investors. Why did investors make money-losing investments when it should have been obvious and so forth? What are they thinking? And there are three elements in prospect theory. All change is relative, sensitivity diminishes with scale, and losses are averted more than gains are sought. Consider two people, let's say Amy and Bob, and they each have a net worth of $1 million. But you can see here, Amy is really happy and Bob is really sad. And why? Well, because last month, Amy was worth only $500,000, while last month Bob was worth $2 million, and now he's only worth $1 million. So both of them have the same amount of money today, but when you ask them a question, they're going to gauge the answer to the question relative to their previous experience, relative to their immediate memory of their lives. How satisfied are you with our brand? Relative to what? My life in general. And so the subjectivity of VOC feedback is a critical weakness in VOC feedback. Subjectivity is an asset because it's personal and it's central to a person's life, but it's also, it can throw you off if you're not careful. Let me just give you an example. At one non-U.S. company, a large non-U.S. company, the senior executives' bonuses were gated based on NPS performance, what they called their strategic net promoter score, their strategic NPS. And the strategic NPS at this company was based on random interviews of 400 customers every month. So how likely are you to recommend our brand? And based on the answers to those 400 questions, they calculated their NPS score every month. And here you go. Here's the bar chart that shows this every month during the 2012 to 2014 timeframe. And you can see toward the end of 13, the NPS dropped off considerably. And that was right at bonus time, and the bonuses were lost. So the executives were deeply concerned about this. But the problem was not the changing opinion of the company per se. The problem was the context in which these questions were being asked, because they weren't asking their customers, how satisfied are you relative to our competitors? They weren't asking their competitors' customers, how satisfied are you with their brand? And in fact, general consumer sentiment declined. I want to show you a chart of consumer confidence in this country relative to the NPS score. And you can see the exact same pattern. What really happened was consumer confidence had plummeted toward the end of 2013 for some reason, and that had been reflected in the company's strategic NPS score. So the subjectivity of this kind of feedback data is really, really an important issue in analyzing its accuracy. However, there's a lot of non-VOC objective customer experience quality data that's out there. We've always been trying to measure things like what percentage of products are defective, what was the customer's hold time in minutes, how many complaints do we receive, how late is the average flight, what proportion of produce was spoiled, how many errors are there in the invoicing process. These are objective elements of data that are observational. I simply look at what's happening. And the same thing is true in the digital experience. Traditional digital experience metrics include things like number of website visits, right? Click-through rates, information downloads, keyword searches. But there's a lot more involved in the digital experience. You could look at how a customer moves their mouse. You could look at how fast or slowly they scroll through the pages. You could look at their navigation paths, the page load times, the form completion rates, and all those data points you can get through simple observation, and yet they're very objective. These are not subjective data points. These are objective. These are facts. These are what actually happens on your website or in the digital experience. On the next slide, you'll see a picture of what Decibel calls a bird's nest pattern of mousetrap behavior. This bird's nest, it's obvious what's happening here. The customer is frustrated. You don't have to ask the customer whether they're frustrated. They are frustrated, and it's obvious in the bird's nest pattern. Or another problem is multi-clicking. Multi-clicking is when you go to a page and you click repeatedly on a particular button or two. Now, it might be a button that is not responsive, and it should be responsive. It could be a click button that's responding the wrong way, as British Airways found out when they observed multi-click behavior on their hotel rooms websites. When the customer clicked the next button, it actually showed a previous hotel room by accident. It was an improperly designed page. And when they revealed that, they didn't have to get that information from asking customers, were you happy with your web experience? They could observe customers, and they were obviously not happy with it. But in addition to the bird's nest and multi-clicking and other examples that show clear customer frustration and poor customer experiences, you can also have higher user engagement directly observed in the digital experience. For instance, reading time and scroll speed and mouse tracks that follow text paragraph by paragraph, or even sometimes line by line. Many people use their mouse to sort of track where they are on a web page, and if you see a mouse track going down carefully over the copy on your page, you can say with reasonable amount of confidence the customer is truly engaged in the page. They're reading it, they're careful. Some customers even do it line by line. So simply by observing your digital experience directly, you can actually make qualitative data available now at a quantitative scale. So voice of customer survey responses, they indicate what your customers think is happening, but quantitative observational data, such as that provided by Decibel, can often tell you why. And the question really is, might there now be a way to track objective observational data of DX quality overall? Might there be an overall objective measurement of digital experience quality? And that's, I think, what Ben's going to talk to you about now with the digital experience score.
Thanks, Don. In the real world, to compete with online, a store must create really amazing experiences to attract customers. This is American Girl. For those that aren't familiar, it's where children can buy dolls that look like themselves and get the doll's haircut and ears pierced and even buy clothes to match their own. It's an amazing experience. But like with any store, shop associates keep a respectful distance from the prospective customer, looking out for buying or churn signals in their body language. And they then step in when it counts. And that's what we call in digital real time. Understanding body language online is that much harder. Recently, I wanted to buy some trainers online. So I searched and scrolled and clicked and went through a whole bunch of alternatives to find the pair that I liked. By the time I found them, I was actually pretty excited about these new trainers. But then I was unable to add them to the basket. And I was kind of filled with horror having spent all this time trying to find them. So I tried again and again several times using different ways to try and fake it, but I just could not get these trainers into the basket. I felt helpless and I felt frustrated because I knew that the brand didn't know that I was having that problem, which meant the problem wouldn't be fixed anytime soon. So eventually, obviously, I gave up because the brand only uses quantitative data, i.e. what happened, and not qualitative data, why it happened. The brand just thought that I didn't want them. So for the next week, everywhere I go online, they're teasing me with adverts for the trainers that I want, but I can't buy. In the end, I end up buying the trainers from somewhere else, and I plan to become a loyal customer of that website instead because actually the choice was better and the experience was easier. But in this day and age, shouldn't a brand be able to identify these type of issues as they happen so they can A, communicate proactively to the frustrated user to acknowledge the issue and keep them in that buying cycle, and B, so they can fix their site or app so it doesn't happen for other people as well. Now, this is completely feasible, but you need to start with a reliable metric. And we did a study of 2.2 billion users to find out if there was a link between that digital body language and the way they interacted. And what we saw was when frustration was displayed, for example, in a multi-click type pattern that Don just described, there was an 82% lower completion of goals. And when there was confusion, for example, a bird's nest where someone's looking around trying to find information, there was less than half as many goals achieved. But when there was reading, there was true engagement, there was a 300% uplift in as many goals that were achieved. So we can start to see a correlation between experience and then outcome. So why don't brands do this online now? Mainly, it's because they've been heavily relying on traditional or service level analytics that just weren't designed to track digital experience. So the gap between someone having an issue and them having that resolved relies on the customer having to reach out, or should I say scream out to the brand, often publicly, to report the problem. But brands shouldn't be waiting for the customer to tell them. The digital experience maturity curve shows a series of stages a brand needs to go through to be able to get to the point where they can offer amazing experiences and real-time messaging if it goes wrong, so they can respond to customers if those customers experience issues. But when we ran a survey, we discovered that most companies were actually stuck at stages 1 and 2. And that means that they're aligned to improve customer experience. They don't have the qualitative data needed to move them from optimizing by persuasion to optimizing for better experience. Now, there's a distinction between these two things. Conversion rate optimization is all about persuading someone to get over that line that one time, focusing normally on specific elements of that journey, whereas optimizing for experience is designed to create smooth, inspirational journeys and in turn repeat customers, because don't forget that once a customer has paid for themselves, they're free. So every additional purchase that they make is highly profitable. So it's a much better use of time and resource to optimize for creating a better experience, because in turn you get more valuable long-term customers. So yes, to do this, you need qualitative data at a quantitative scale. So you can understand what's happening for all customers all the time. And we call this experience data. Now, some people are turning to voice of customer for qualitative data, which can be very useful, especially when combined with session replay to watch back what happened for the user when they give feedback. Because what people say isn't necessarily what happens, so it's great to be able to see that for yourself, what really did happen. But survey responses tend to only represent a small percentage of customers, and those customers often have a very strong polarized view of love or hate towards that brand. According to Gartner, 70% of enterprise businesses ask customers if they'd recommend their brand to a friend or colleague. But that NPS question just doesn't really correlate if someone just had a bad experience. They don't throw away their whole love for a brand, but they still had that bad experience and they still want to kind of say they did. So NPS isn't necessarily really useful in this context. To be able to identify issues that need fixing and communicate when anything happens, we need a reliable set of data, but for all active customers all the time. I think companies should monitor experience almost like a trader does at the markets, or like a shop associate does with someone's body language, looking for issues and helping that customer back on track if they go off it in real time. Now, obviously, this is not necessary if tech can achieve the same at scale, but to do that, you need to have this real-time pulse of all your active customers all the time. So where traditional or service level analytics track clicks to gather the data needed, we track what happens in between the clicks, because that's where you learn about how someone really behaves, why they behave that way, and how they feel about those interactions. From this, we can harvest these new metrics and behaviors related specifically to customer experience, as Don talked about. So we start with experience data. This is the data that we collect from between the clicks. And we then use that to harvest this new set of metrics specific to customer experience, like the distance someone moves a mouse, the speed in which they move it, the number of directional changes, the amount they hesitate on content, and every type of interaction they have. And from that, we can then detect their behavior, which helps us then to be able to construe exactly what their state of mind was at that moment. Now we use all of this type of data to then feed into our algorithms to look at all the different parts of an experience, which then rolls up to one overall number between 0 and 10, like an NPS score, to give us a sense of whether they are improving or degrading the experience. So we start by looking at the quality of the navigational experience across the whole app or a part of it, let's say a particular journey or goal. So we score that. Then we look at the quality of the technical performance of the site, and we score that. That could be the speed that someone loads, but it's taking in multiple different variables to then conclude what that experience was like for the user and if it had an effect on experience. We then look at the form and see how efficient and easy that was to complete. But of course, the form is the business end of any interaction, so it's important that we assess that. And then we look at the level of engagement across the site or app and also the level of frustration. And then we use that into one overall algorithm, which creates what we call the digital experience score, or DXS. And this can give one number, even across 300 websites globally, just to give a sense to, at a board level, the quality of the experience and whether it's being improved or degraded. That then cascades down an organization to be able to score a particular country or a particular app or particular website, or a particular goal, so a series of different interactions to achieve a particular goal, or a particular page. And this all culminates because we are able to score every single user interaction. And every time they come to the site, looking at changes in experience over time, and also for their particular session as well. So it manifests itself on a dashboard which prioritizes the key issues based not necessarily on the number of people that experience them, but actually the most impactful issues that would have the biggest impact on churn, or in other words, which ones will have the biggest impact on improving customer experience if you focus on them. It's for another webinar, but third-party research shows that there's a direct correlation between DXS and conversion. So we know if we focus on the elements that are causing the biggest degradation of DXS, that we can achieve a much better experience and conversion. We then highlight the metrics causing them so that you know what to fix. So experience data is needed to objectively measure digital experience, because once you have a reliable measure, you can then identify the priority issues to fix and to enable brands to communicate and empathize with customers if those experiences go wrong.
So that gives us 3 key takeaways from this webinar, folks, what Ben and I were talking about. I hope you all appreciate the difference between subjective and objective customer experience data. Objective data is based on direct observation, whether you're tracking the schedule of a flight or tracking the track of a mouse on your website. And DX data is as important as traditional data. And the third key takeaway is you may know what happened, but now Decibel, it can actually tell you why. Back to you, Ben.
Okay, to download our report on digital experience optimization, please go to our website, which is decibelinsight.com/DXT. That's decibelinsight.com/DXT. And while you're doing that, we'll start on the questions. And Don, this is probably the first question for you. The question is, have you got any advice on how to drive forward digital transformation in a business? I work in the analyst department, which is somewhat siloed off from the rest of the organization, making it difficult and time-intensive to get stakeholder buy-in.
Yeah, I have decades of advice for you. I'm not exactly sure how to sum it up, but I think it's a mistake to believe that a digital transformation at a company can be done from the top down. It really does require buy-in within the whole organization, and the alignment and mindset problems are particularly difficult. Even when you put the tools in place, you have to be willing to accept what the data is saying, and you have to be capable of affecting change. So despite the fact that the vast majority of companies in the world today are in fact concerned with their customer experience in some way or another, the majority of efforts to improve that customer experience are still wanting. They're still not as good as they could be, because a lot of times companies don't take it quite seriously enough. So yeah, you need the CEO's buy-in, you need all the department heads buy-in, but it's more than their top-level buy-in. You really need to educate and celebrate the small successes within the ranks of the company, and if possible, bring everybody in on it. I could go into more detail, but there's not enough time, even if this webinar lasted for 24 hours. It's the best thing I could advise is go around your company and find some other disciples, some other advocates for this method of change, and try to change it from within. That's my advice.
Okay, thanks, Don. There's a bunch of other questions, actually, which are all kind of related in some way. I'll read a few of them out. How do you measure frustration like the bird's nest? Quantity of time this occurs? How is engagement and frustration assessed? Is it just mouse movement and page views? What are some of the metrics you're using to quantify the experience pillars? So these are obviously some of the mechanics of how we do it. So let me go back to the point that traditional analytics collects information on clicks. What we are doing is tracking information between the clicks. So in order to be able to make conclusions about the experience, the old type of data didn't really fit the bill. We needed to create a new set of data. So by tracking the distance someone moves a mouse, for instance, you can get a very different perspective on the experience someone has. You know, in the real world, you wouldn't go to the back of a Target store to buy your morning coffee because it's too inconvenient. You have to walk a long way. So why should that be any different online? And if it takes you a mile of mouse movement to transact on one site versus a half mile on another site where you're doing the same thing, inherently that mile was a worse experience. So in the past, people have had segments based on these old metrics, but now suddenly you can overlay on top of that this understanding of how long someone had to move to be able to do something. And of course, there used to be this idea that you should never have more than 3 clicks to get to a piece of content, which is this arbitrary number. But actually knowing how much effort someone has to place on doing something is in itself useful. But when you start laying over that, also the velocity of the mouse movement, the way that it accelerates, the number of directional changes, and whether that's acute angles or not, or the speed in which they're scrolling around at the same time, whether they hesitate on certain content, where they're trying to click or click multiple times. All these different types of interactions weren't recorded before in a way that you can analyze them. And we are collecting and harvesting this data and feeding them into our algorithms, which is helping us understand the key aspects of an experience. And in fact, the algorithm actually adjusts itself to different types of websites, because some websites are around filling in a form, it's around content, and some are transactional. And it mutes different parts of the algorithm depending on the type of interactions happening on that particular site. So I can't give you the actual algorithms and mechanisms, but what I can say is it's using a very new type of data, and we are validating that actually when we have a score, that this is a reality, these things are actually happening for these people behind the scenes. The great thing about it is, and it's something we actually experienced ourselves, we actually released a bit of content out a little while ago with a gate. So people had to come and log it, to write their details to download a report. And when our marketing department released it out and sent it out to thousands of people, they were watching this dashboard to find out what was happening on that page. And they quickly discovered that one of the buttons wasn't working because people were getting very frustrated and not being able to interact, and it was showing up on as a frustration. And the result of that was they were able to fix the problem almost immediately and then save the campaign, which if they hadn't done would have been a disaster. But what's interesting for me is that on our website, which doesn't get very many users compared to the likes of a multinational e-tailer, we would still not have been able to spot that problem unless we'd had this algorithm to point it out, which it did. And that's the important aspect for me. It's to be able to spot stuff that you can't see, and we're doing that by using this new set of data in our algorithms. I hope that kind of gives you some sense. There is a report on this on our website about how we go about it. And of course, if you let us know afterwards, we can send you some more information that we have. I think we have a white paper on this as well to discuss how we go about doing it.
I could just add my 2 cents here, Ben. After our initial meeting a few months ago, I went on your website. I was very impressed with the amount of intellectual content that's freely available in the white papers and studies. It's done an admirable job. Good information on the website.
Thank you. And another question that's come in. It says, is the tool as useful for apps as for websites? The answer to that is yes, and I'm assuming that's being asked because some types of interactions on websites can't be replicated on an app. But that goes both ways. On an app, you have pinching in and out, you have turning the phone from landscape to portrait. So there are other types of interactions that you can detect on those type of devices, which then feed into these algorithms as well. So in short, yeah, absolutely, it is just as useful. Next question. Is the aggregated experience metric of frustration, clicks, distance, acceleration, then based on the page and the page type? Is the score calibrated by the researcher? So yes, it is in part based on the type of page that it is and also the type of website it is as well. So depending on the type of interactions going on around it. And it says, is the score calibrated by the researcher? Is the researcher validating it? There is validation of our algorithms, and it's machine learning to make sure that we are progressing our algorithm as more data comes into it. So in answer, yes, but it's not all manual. Partly it's being able to validate, but partly it's not. I mean, to be honest, once you see a identification of a frustrated user and you watch back a session replay, you can quickly see that it was what really was happening. It's not difficult to understand what was happening at that time once you visually have an understanding of what went on. Are there any more questions? Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much all for joining today. I really enjoyed being able to talk about this subject. And Don, thank you very much for your input. We very much appreciate everything you've done, and we enjoy working with you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks very much.
We'll send a follow-up email with the recording and some other details. But have a great rest of your day.